Hello again. So, besides writing East of Eden, which is really sort of a tale of Cain and Abel, it's a biblical book, which again was just as much received just as much high acclaim um, as the Grapes of Wrath. We can move forward from that. There were many different novels that Steinbeck wrote over the course of his life, many of which were more obscure, perhaps, and some articles that were more obscure. If we've heard of The Pearl, perhaps, or again, Cannery Row or Tortilla Flats, all of these things had a great deal to do with a certain empathy that had grown in him and swelled in him from his influence with women being, I think, a great deal of an influence in his life. So, why did he write Travels with Charlie? This sort of surge of uniformity in the 50s. There's a wonderful book by David Halberstam, sort of tells us a great deal, details everything of what was going on when it comes to conformity, Levittowns, Holiday Inns, McDonald's, things like that that were established during this time. The uniformity of the 50s, and then this outbreak in the 1960s, right? The civil rights movement, sit-ins in Greensboro. He was just preceding this, right, in writing in 1960, this Travels with Charlie. The integration in the South, what was happening in Greensboro, North Carolina. People were in a Woolworths, which was a restaurant, a lot of young black men and women who, they were sitting in hopes that they would be served just like anybody else, just like the white folks in the United States. So he was seeing these things on television. The advent of television was a big deal, and being able to have access to a lot of these horrific events that were going on. McCarthyism, certainly the sort of if we looked into any one of these things, McCarthyism, certainly the House of Un-American Activities Committee, things like that, people who believed that everybody was red, communism, there was so much fear, a great deal of fear during this time, a great deal of upheaval, and a great deal of conflict and uncertainty. I think we might be somewhat familiar with that feeling, right? So this piqued Steinbeck's curiosity, and so he wrote this novel as a way to revisit the United States and understand exactly what was happening, and see it for himself. So, this long list of things really did inspire him to say, wait a minute, I'm going to put everything on pause and I'm going to go out there. As an ailing man, keep in mind, he was not necessarily very well in health. He went out and he took this trip, right? So, in reading parts one and two, I hope that you found that, the themes that are recurring tend to be about progress. Progress seems like destruction. When we think of growth, do we think of living things, or do we think about economy, right? Something that I think, again, it parallels quite well with the sort of conversations that are being had today. So here is sort of a background. I hope that you got to listen through. And keep in mind, this was, it received great praise. Steinbeck died in 1968. He actually spent a good deal of his time, the latter part of his life, during the days of the Vietnam War. He was jumping out of helicopters. He was still a correspondent until his dying day. He really did do quite a bit. And so Steinbeck was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1962. And this book in particular that we're reading in this class received a great deal of praise. So keep that in mind, and I hope you